Recording right now. What's up, Teach Better family? This is Joshua Stamper and Katie Miglin with me for the Admin Mastermind Recap. And Katie, we just had a really productive and quite passionate conversation this morning, which I'm super excited about. But I want to say that I think it was because of the starter question. I'm not gonna lie.
I think so. It was a strong starter question.
Well, I built it mostly for you. So if folks don't know, Katie does a Halloween party every October. And it seems, I don't know, maybe I'm missing it, but it feels like it gets bigger and like more of a production every single year. Is that true?
It doesn't necessarily, but some people who attend make it out to be maybe, yes.
So our starter question was, in a school where student discipline is the theme of a costume party, what creative costume would you wear to represent it? And we got a lot of funny answers for this. So Katie, I don't know, maybe you can, if you want to start with what you said first, and then maybe share what other folks put in the comments and talked about. I thought it was pretty hilarious though.
It was funny because there was two different interpretations of the question. One of the interpretations was like, what would your discipline look like? So, like you would be representing whatever the discipline side of it. And then the other one was what the behavior was that led to the discipline. So there was comments for both. I think my favorite one was someone said they would come late to class with social medias all over their sweatshirt, hoodie would be up and earbuds would be in. And I thought that was so like accurate of what we see sometimes in our classrooms. I said I wouldn't even attend. I would stay home to represent an out-of-school suspension. We had kind of just the mix, right? Like people on their phones or people doing TikTok dances. So I don't know. I just felt like there were some really funny responses on how you interpreted the question.
For sure. And one of the administrators talked about like some of the consequences that they've been providing, which is more set with the example of, okay, if they did something, for instance, let's say throwing food in the cafeteria, then they would help with custodian to help, clean up as kind of a consequence that's related, which then kind of bridged to the topic of student discipline, which we're talking through the month of October. And so the first question thrown out was, what creative consequences have you implemented in your school that have had a positive impact on student behavior? So what were your takeaways from this question?
I absolutely loved that the person who shared, shout out to Mark Horner, who shared his example of a costume. That was a segue because it was such a creative way for discipline, and that was kind of a theme that we hit on early on in the conversation was the idea that we want there to be some balance between like the natural consequence, but also understanding that what a student does they can repair the situation. And it doesn't always have to be this like, old school mentality of like the harsh reprimanding and, hallway, like yelling, whatever. It can be something where a student is like physically learning. And so I really did like that he shared if a student has struggled with cafeteria behavior and need, making a mess, they work with the custodial staff to clean it. If they have struggled with classroom behavior, maybe they're working with that teacher to not only repair the relationship, but also to help in the classroom. But I think the big takeaway and where I thought the creative side came in is it was really looking at like, what is the behavior doing and how is it impacting the culture, the environment? So whether it's the classroom, whether it's the hallway, whether it's a cafeteria, whatever the space is, having the student reflect on, this is my behavior and here's how it's impacting others. I'm going to fix that, rather than some of those top, those kind of surface level like behaviors or consequences that really don't hit on the actual behavior. So, us having just a kid sit in an in-school suspension all day, like, well, what is that actually achieving? What are we having the student actually reflect? There's quite a few people who shared like some sort of written reflection. So a personality test or kind of writing their feelings out, which is good, especially for the adults in that person's life to be able to read it and see where the student is at mentally and kind of what are some things that they're doing to process. I think those are helpful, but I did really appreciate the ones that were more that physical movement and establishing relationships.
Yeah, establishing relationships and then also teaching the skills needed to be successful not only in the classroom, but for life. And so the social skills activities and the reflection process and kind of the restorative practices that were discussed was wonderful, which, we only talked really today about 2 questions. I mean, it wasn't really extensive as far as me getting into a lot of different areas because it was so rich in conversation. And, there was some resources provided as far as, some of the things that they do if the student is removed from the classroom, for them to maybe, reflect, like you said, personality tests, maybe a forced choice quiz, or even having like apology letters written to those who were impacted from the student behavior. So really impactful ways that could be creative, not just using the typical discipline, which is, your detentions, your in-school suspension, or your out-of-school suspension. So looking forward to kind of expanding on that in further weeks too, of trying to make sure that we understand what are some ways, because as an administrator, we do have a lot of power in what we do with the student discipline and consequences. So, just giving that permission to not have to always use the same 3 things, but again, to build those relationships and to make sure that they understand how their choices are impacting others and how to repair that. So that was kind of our next piece, was like the balance of discipline. So the next question was like, how do you balance the need for discipline with the goals of teaching students valuable life skills through consequences? And I feel like this was kind of like the meat of our conversation for today. So Katie, what were some things that you brought out of that question?
Well, I want to say first, it was eye-opening. It was clear that this is an area where a lot of people are struggling and figuring out that balance, which in some ways is nice to know you're not alone, but the other side is, it's sad that this is like where we're at. But a couple of things kind of stood out to me was working with the teachers. And I say that's very specifically of working with the teachers to understand what's happening in their classrooms and what steps have already been taken. Several administrators today shared how that's what they look for first. So they will reach out to the teacher, what kind of things have you tried? Have you called home? Understanding the whole picture so that their next steps can be appropriate. And that's so important, not only for supporting the student and understanding kind of what hasn't worked, to find things that maybe will work, but also to show that you're supporting the teacher. That was kind of a concern that came up, as some teachers didn't necessarily feel supported, and they felt like, they see their student cleaning tables in the cafeteria. How is that an actual consequence? And so we had a little bit at the end, I felt like some dialogue around like, well, how do you work to keep that trust between your staff and you as the administrator, talking about the why or what's your goal of your discipline, so that it's not just an out of school or an in-school suspension. Some of those things that we know are kind of our hot topics, our taglines, but really getting to the root of what you want to achieve with your discipline and understanding the teacher's side of that as well. And you had shared some great examples. I know you've shared before on how you can work with a teacher to give them time and space to repair the relationships, but also, just the restorative side of it is just as valuable as the consequence. And so I did like that there was this moment of like kind of realness of like, this is a constant concern, that we're all trying to be mindful of. But then it is like, okay, well, what are some actionable steps that we can take? Reaching out to teachers, building that relationship so we understand the trust, but then also giving them the time to be able to do the necessary steps, whether it's call home, whether it's reach out to the student, whatever that might look like in your building.
Yeah, I thought starting with like the concerns was great, because we can kind of knock it out piece by piece. And there were a lot of concerns, obviously. When you have a campus, let's say 100 teachers, and some folks have over 1,000 students, like it's hard to make sure that everybody's on the same page. But I think the consistency piece was huge, because everyone needs to understand, let's define what consequences are first. Like I had to do that with my staff, because what I was finding was that some folks had the same definition as I did, and others had a very different. Yes. And so if like just that one word isn't defined and agreed upon, then that's going to make the communication and the result potentially a really like battling topic, because we don't see eye to eye on such a simple thing. And so I loved also, Katie, what you talked about with like a survey to determine like your connected or safe person in your building, because sometimes students don't possess that. And if you don't have that relationship that's with an adult in the school, then you're going to have a really difficult time, making connections and feeling a part of that educational community. So I loved, what you talked about with that survey. I know we talked about parent communication too. And then, of course, I chimed in as far as like, as an administrator, what can we do with teachers to help them with providing time to make those phone calls home, to have those difficult conversations with those students, because teachers have a lot on their plate. And as you know, it's hard to get to everything within the school day. And not that they devalue that. It's just a matter of like, where is going to fit in. And so as an administrator, you want that teacher to be a part of that process. You want them to be hand in hand in all of it, because I think a lot of teachers feel like there's a disconnect, right, as far as them being a part of that process. So we want to bring them in, but we also don't want it to be an added stressor to an already difficult job. So as administrators, we need to be mindful of that. So looking forward to like expanding on that.
Like on a topic that might be hard for them to talk through. So if there was a big conflict in the classroom, that teacher may struggle to open it up again to then call home. So I think an easy way for you as an administrator to communicate with a teacher is to say, not, I won't deal with this until you've called home. I feel like sometimes that is a little bit harsher, but maybe say, is there anything I can do to help you so that you can make that call? Whether it's they need coaching, whether they need time, whatever it looks like, but just being mindful that it sometimes can be a sensitive subject that a teacher maybe doesn't want to have to like open back up and talk through, because that's it, depending on the situation, it could be tough.
Yeah, we got to have that open communication of like determining what's the barrier. Because sometimes it's just fear itself. Like they haven't talked to the parent before, and they don't want to get yelled at or cussed at or whatnot. So it's like, as an administrator, sometimes I've had 10 to 12 conversations with the parent already. And, it's been a wonderful relationship. And so just letting the teacher know, like, you don't have to worry about calling this parent. They're completely supportive of the school. So, even just having a simple conversation like that can, put the teacher at ease to make that phone call. So, just opening up the line of communication to see how you can support them in a way. It might be something pretty small, or maybe it's just being a presence in the room as they call. So there's a lot of things that we can do to make a teacher's life easier, and to bring them into that conversation. So Katie, I cannot wait for the rest of this month and for this topic. I kind of nerd out on this, so I'm excited. So for everyone that's listening or watching on YouTube, make sure you're joining us every Tuesday morning, 9 a.m. Eastern time. It's super simple. All you have to do is go to teachbetter.com/mastermind to sign up. It is free, and you get to be with some phenomenal administrators every single week to help and collaborate. I know a lot of folks, especially right now in the month of October, that honeymoon period is over, and we're starting to see some escalated behaviors. And so, you can't be on a silo. You can't be on an island. You got to make sure that you have your folks, your people, to help you through that time. So I appreciate you, Katie.
If you're a teacher, make sure you share it so that with another administrator, so that we can get some new faces, even if there's someone who's not ready to contribute, but they're ready to consume. We have plenty of people who just jump in with their, us in their ears, and they just listen to the conversation. But it's always important to share and kind of build our network so that we can support each other.
It's true. Well, Katie, I appreciate you being a part of my network, and I love having you at Admin Mastermind. Thank you so much for joining me for this recap.
Absolutely. Thank you, Josh.
Oh, you know what? I got to push buttons now. So I guess I'm going to just kind of hang around, and no, I'm just kidding.